All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving into some fascinating stuff today.
Yeah.
The big news, obviously.
Big.
Trump is back in the White House.
Back in the White House, yeah.
And world leaders are trying to figure out what that means, right?
Absolutely scrambling.
What does this mean for global politics? What does this mean for, all these...
For world order.
The world order.
Yeah.
And we are going to focus in on one particular reaction that we thought was really interesting, and that's coming out of Russia.
All right.
And specifically, we're talking about Vladimir Putin.
Of course, yeah.
We've got this news.com article that really dives into Putin's statements about Trump being reinstated.
Yeah.
And, what this means for everything, but particularly the war in Ukraine.
Right.
So, just right off the bat, when you read this article, like, Putin's not really holding back, is he?
No, he's not. I was really struck, by the way, he goes like way beyond just your typical diplomatic congratulations.
Right.
When a new leader is elected, or in this case reinstated, he's really leaning into this strongman image of Trump.
Yes.
He actually uses the phrase real man.
Yeah, he calls him a real man.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And he's praising him for overcoming adversity. And he even mentions those alleged assassination attempts.
Yeah, he talks about, the assassination attempts and also how Trump was like
bullied.
Yeah, during his first presidency.
During his first term.
Like, is there something strategic? Do you think there's something strategic about that kind of language that he's using?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very deliberate. It plays right into, the way Trump sees himself.
Yeah.
That fighter that never gives up.
Right.
And by framing it this way, Putin's kind of subtly suggesting that they're both
allies.
Yeah, like on the same side against
a common enemy.
A common enemy, exactly. Yeah, it's a clever way to build rapport.
Right.
And maybe pave the way for, more favorable negotiations down the line. It's kind of like that, enemy of my enemy, my friend kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not just talk, right?
Yeah.
He goes on to highlight Trump's call for restoring direct communication between the U.S. and Russia.
Yes. Which, of course, is a huge shift from how things were with the previous administration.
Huge, yeah.
So what do you think Putin's hoping for with this renewed dialogue?
Whoa.
Like, is it just about, thawing relations, or is there a bigger agenda at play?
He says pretty explicitly that the dialogue needs to be based on equality and mutual respect.
Right.
Now, on the surface, that might sound like standard diplomatic talk.
Yeah.
But you have to remember the context.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine is still raging.
Exactly.
So suddenly, those words carry a lot more weight.
Yeah, we're not talking about just like theoretical principles anymore.
Right.
We're talking about potentially real concessions.
Absolutely.
Like shifts in actual geopolitical power.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the big question. What does Putin want with regard to the war in Ukraine?
Now that Trump's back in office.
Right.
The article quotes him saying that he wants a lasting peace based on the legitimate interests of everyone involved.
Legitimate interests. Yeah, that's a loaded phrase, isn't it?
It really is. Because those legitimate interests, that's what's being fought over.
Right, exactly.
So what does Putin consider legitimate?
Right.
There's a lot of speculation that he sees that as Russia keeping the territory that it's already taken.
Yeah.
And that, Trump, in his desire to make a deal, wrap this up, might be willing to go along with that.
It's possible.
And, on the one hand, peace is a good thing.
Of course.
But if it means basically rewarding Putin for invading his sovereign country,
right.
That sets a really dangerous precedent, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And it could embolden him to, take even more territory in the future.
Right, like it just destabilizes the entire region.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a huge gamble.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that this is just Putin's perspective, right?
Right.
Ukraine obviously has their own perspective.
Of course.
The U.S. is NATO allies, China, what are they going to do?
Right. It's like all the pieces on the chessboard are moving around and we don't know where they're going to land.
So what do you think is the key takeaway here?
Yeah.
Like, what's the most important thing for our listener to understand?
I think the main takeaway is that Putin sees Trump's return as a real opportunity.
Okay.
He's already laying the groundwork for a reset in U.S.-Russia relations.
Yeah.
And he wants a resolution to the war in Ukraine that benefits him.
Right.
Now, whether he'll succeed is another question.
Yeah.
But his actions show that the balance of power in the world could shift dramatically.
Yeah. So with Trump back in the White House, the stakes are incredibly high.
Incredibly.
And it really makes you wonder, I mean, how will Trump's foreign policy be different this time around?
Good question.
And what impact will that have on, the U.S. and Russia and the war in Ukraine? Big questions.
These are big questions that we're all going to be facing.
Absolutely.
As we move into this, new and uncertain chapter.
A new world.
In world affairs, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Dive.
See you next time.
We'll see you next time.